It was built in the final years of World War II to fill the need for a carrier-based long-range torpedo bomber. The plane seemed outdated from the moment it hit the drawing board, but this prop design aircraft engineered in the early days of jet propulsion would see service well into the space age. I'm Paul Max Moga, and I've flown some of the most sophisticated airplanes ever built. And this is the Military Aviation Museum in Virginia Beach, Virginia, home to one of the largest private collections of restored warbirds in the world. Over its long career, it went by many names: Spad, Able Dog, Batface, and the Flying Dump Truck. But the Douglas Skyraider had one of the longest service careers in aviation history.
My name is Mike Spalding. I'm a volunteer pilot.
And we're at that Skyraider right now, so tell me a little bit about this specific plane.
Our airplane is a 1949. It was manufactured by Douglas Aircraft. It went straight into the Navy, went straight to Korea, ended up with VA-195, a squadron known as the Dam Busters.
What was its main purpose when it was originally built?
It was designed as a ground attack airplane. It wasn't designed to air, although it has, and it can defend itself if it has to with its 20mm guns it had. Very responsive. It has hydraulically boosted ailerons for roll. It won't roll fast, but it takes the pressure off the controls for the pilot. It's got dive brakes, so it can go straight down and really not accelerate to drop its load and then pull out. It was very versatile, and almost anything you wanted to hang on it, it would take and drop, and it could do just about anything you did.
1944. The world is at war. In the skies over the Pacific, U.S. forces are locked in a brutal air battle with Japan. Military planners and engineers struggle to keep up with the quickly evolving tactics and technology of modern warfare. It is this pressure-charged atmosphere that forges the Douglas Skyraider. But even as the Douglas engineers are developing the Skyraider, many in the aircraft industry thought it was already obsolete. The waning days of World War II was an era obsessed with speed. It was the beginning of the development of the jet engine. While the rest of the industry is working to shatter the sound barrier, the Douglas engineers are wrestling old-fashioned problems with propellers and radial engines. The Skyraider is the pinnacle of piston-powered aviation, but at the time, no one saw the need for climbing that pinnacle. History would prove the doubters wrong. The evolution of this remarkable aircraft is rooted in the decades of technological and military advancements. 1925, 20 years before the Skyraider's first flight. The U.S. Navy has only one aircraft carrier. 10 years later, in 1935, this figure only increases to 4. Naval aviation is in its infancy. The use and worth of the carriers is becoming evident. But the world's navies assess their strength by the number and caliber of battleship guns they deploy. As the numbers of ships and planes slowly increases, the value of naval aviation and the function and worth of carriers becomes apparent. It is also becoming clear to many that the future of naval conflict will be dominated by air power. The war at sea will soon be won or lost in the air. The side with the most sophisticated aircraft will win. Ship versus ship will mean plane against plane. In 1938, American Navy pilots carry out a mock raid on a major Navy installation and demonstrate the overwhelming threat to ground forces of a carrier-based attack. Their target is Pearl Harbor. 3 years later, the Japanese carry out the same attack. Only theirs is no exercise. The United States is at war. The Japanese Imperial Fleet were keen students of carriers. They learned much, not only through their own experiments, but through close observation of their nearest powerful neighbor, the US Navy. The methods they employ are similar. Their types of planes mirror the Americans, and the results they achieved were similar to those of the American naval exercises. Total surprise and devastating victory. Pearl Harbor not only silences all arguments from the die-hard battleship supporters, it also settles the matter in a practical way. After Pearl Harbor, the only American force of real power capable of action are the carriers. In the early days of the war, the carrier complements are in transition. Monoplanes are taking over from the trusty biplanes. But early combat highlights the fact that American aviation technology is terribly flawed. Fortunately, the conflict in Europe gives a short but significant lead time to aircraft designers, and production is already underway on new, more effective planes. Two planes will carry the weight of the war for U.S. ships. Both planes follow the established pattern of two-seat dive bombers and three-seat torpedo bombers. The Helldiver, ordered in 1939 and first flown in 1940, becomes the standard Navy dive bomber of the last 2 years of the war. But throughout its career, it is troublesome and displays several flaws. The Curtiss SB-2C Helldiver was a carrier-based dive bomber produced for the United States Navy during World War II. Developed to replace the Douglas SBD Dauntless, it was a much larger and faster aircraft, able to operate from the latest aircraft carriers of the time. The Helldiver could carry a considerable array of armament and featured an internal bomb bay that reduced drag when carrying heavy ordnance. It's unstable, and it's a tough plane to maintain. The plane does not live up to its expectation as a load carrier for its short takeoff capability. But the Helldivers are the best planes available for the job, and they are used to good effect. On the other hand, the Grumman Avenger torpedo bombers are a great success. The Grumman TBF Avenger was a torpedo bomber. The aircraft had a large bomb bay, allowing for one torpedo, a single 2,000-pound bomb, or up to 4 500-pound bombs. With a 30,000-foot ceiling and a fully loaded range of 1,000 miles, it was better than any previous American torpedo bomber. And better than its chief opponent, the then obsolete Japanese Nakajima B-5N. The planes the Avengers were to replace, the aging Douglas Devastators, are so outdated, the Avengers are ordered to full production even before the prototype flew. The gamble pays off. With its 2,000-pound bomb or torpedo load, the Avengers are invaluable and stay with the fleet until 1954. Another message is also loud and clear. The layout of attack and bomber aircraft is outdated. The speed and firepower of fighters is such that there was no way for bombers to protect themselves. their gunners are no deterrent to fighter attack. They need to depend on their own fighter escorts for control of the sky. This meant there is no real point to the wasted weight of revolving gun turrets. The load would be better carried as fuel and bombs. Despite casualties, there is no doubt that America's naval strength, based on her carriers, dominates the vast Pacific battlefield. Japan loses 39 battleships and cruisers during the war. Only 4 are sunk by American surface ships. 8 more are dealt with by submarines, and the remaining 27 are sunk by carrier-based planes. Naval aviation is clearly one of the most powerful weapons at America's disposal, and plans are developing to meet needs far beyond the war's end. New, reliable, and powerful engines are available. Experience makes it possible to predict accurately the behavior of a design shape. Combat indicates the gunner is a redundant concept, and in the same way, the observer or bombardier is wasted in a specialized airframe. The next specification for a Navy attack plane to be issued is for a single-seat aircraft. Douglas is working on their submission, the BTD-1. They start in 1942, but it becomes clear that the plane, which is a pre-war design, is no match for its competitors, including the formidable Martin AM-1. To answer the call, Douglas engineers propose a bold change in direction, and the Skyraider is born. During its long service career, the pilots who flew the Skyraiders gave it several names, including Sandy, Spad, Hobo, Firefly, Zorro, the Big Gun, Old Faithful, Old Miscellaneous, Guppy, Q-Bird.
During World War II, as the war in the Pacific rages on, the Navy searches for the next generation of carrier-based attack plane. On the 16th of June, 1944, the leaders of the Douglas Aircraft Company and Navy representatives meet. The chief designer of the Douglas Navy plan is working on a design for the BTD-1, a plane he knows is outdated. In a bold move, he asks the Navy for permission to cancel the BTD-1 and use the contract's funds on a new aircraft. In a hotel room overnight, the design team literally goes back to the drawing board. Using the knowledge they gained in the years since the design of the BTD, the men come up with the outlines of a new plane.
The sketches they present the next morning, and their technical, detailed explanation, intrigues and impresses the Navy's representatives. The Navy allows Douglas to re-enter the competition. The catch is that they only have 9 months to get their plane into the air and comply with very tight and unforgiving specifications. Douglas misses their deadline. The Skyraider was 1 day late to its first flight. About an hour after takeoff, the test pilot is back on the ground, enthusiastic about the plane. Douglas completed the Skyraider on schedule, but they still may be too late. The war is drawing to a conclusion. Douglas now faces the prospect that their market is disappearing. Wartime contracts for 548 planes are canceled. 3 are delivered in 1945, and only another 22 in 1946. But these few planes save the Skyraider. With the end of World War II, the future of a piston-engine aircraft seems questionable. But this plane is clearly something to be reckoned with. Recognizing the versatility of the aircraft, in 1947, the Navy purchases 239 in 3 different versions. Over time, the Skyraider will operate in many other roles. There will be 30 major types and about the same number of subtypes. The Skyraider never ran out of uses. The piece that canceled the Douglas contracts is very short. Korea sees Skyraiders thrown into conflict, where they play a major part in the war. The aerial war is shared between generations of aircraft. Jets are deployed, but their need for long, straight runways hampers their effectiveness, especially in the frantic early days of the war. The North Koreans sweep the peninsula and capture all but the tiny pocket around Pusan, surrounding U.S. forces. The Air Force is hampered by having to fly from Japan with relatively short-range jets. The Navy's carriers are called on for much of the support for soldiers fighting desperately to hang on. Skyraiders are essentially a big fighter plane. They don't have an internal bomb bay. The designers did not include it for 2 reasons. 1, additional weight in hydraulics and hinges for the doors. And 2, it restricts the nature of the load. It is reasoned that strengthened wings with multiple mounts will accommodate a greater variety of armaments. In fact, the Skyraiders will carry at one time or another the whole inventory of armaments, including weapons that were rumors or theories in 1944, when the plane was first drawn up. During the Korean War, Skyraiders take part in highly secret experiments carrying nuclear weapons. And later, in 1953, the AV-4D variant will be developed specifically for that purpose. It was never called on to deliver these weapons. The Skyraider will make and polish its enduring reputation with a range of conventional stores. 7 major models and 28 different versions of the Skyraider were produced, more than any other aircraft in history.
During the Korean War, as the fighting drags on, Skyraiders become an important part of the Navy's Big Punch. The versatile aircraft can carry loads of rockets, napalm, and a range of small and large bombs. The Skyraider's slow speed allows its pilots to deliver munitions with great precision. But Skyraiders have one other outstanding feature. They can carry an enormous variety of armaments. Powered by a 2,800 horsepower radial piston engine, the Skyraider, which weighs only 11,000 pounds, can deliver up to 14,000 pounds of bullets, rockets, and bombs. So here we are at the front section of the aircraft by this big old prop, driven by what appears to be a very large engine.
It is. The Wright 3350, 2,800 horsepower.
2,800 horsepower.
Yeah.
That's impressive. How about how the pitch is controlled by the propeller? Is there anything different about that system?
This particular propeller is pretty much self-contained. You have a lever in the cockpit that moves the lever out here, and it's run by hydraulics internally and adjusts the pitch of the prop depending on what you need for takeoff or cruise.
Now, the other thing that I always think about when I'm at the front of an airplane is, especially a fighter or an attack or a bomber aircraft, is what comes off of the damn thing. You know, I mean, tell me about what kind of armament this plane had on it. It had a multitude of options, right?
Pretty much anything that was designed to be dropped off an airplane, it could do it. It would have missiles, fuel tanks, rockets, bombs, and in one case, a toilet.
That's a story for a different show,
yeah.
right? Now, how about cannons? How many cannons did it have on it?
It has 2 20-millimeter cannons that they started putting on in the 84.
It looks like a pretty big aircraft to me, with obviously just a single propeller for the power plant. What are we talking about as far as minimum speeds, maximum speeds for the airframe?
It's quite versatile on that end. It can fly very slow off the carrier. It would take off with full flaps, 75 knots, and it red lines at 410 knots if it needs to go going straight. Yeah.
And would that be in just a straight down dive?
That would be in a dive.
I remember reading somewhere about a design feature this plane has called dive flaps, which, if people don't know, those are basically on the aircraft to prevent it from overspeeding itself when it's gaining energy by going downhill. This thing had some pretty big ones, if I'm not mistaken.
It's they're called dive brakes. This particular one has 3. They come out the side here. It's a very large door. There's one out each side.
The whole door right here.
The whole door comes out, one each side, and there's a slightly larger one in the bottom that comes out. It allows the airplane to pretty much go, well, can go straight down and to its target to then pull up and
not overspeed itself.
Not overspeed itself.
And you say there's one on this side, there's one on the other side, and then there's one on the belly.
bottom.
And they would all come out at the same time?
All at the same time.
Automatic. Is there just a switch in the cockpit?
There's just basically an in and out switch that hydraulically puts them out.
Well, it's a big rudder, I'll tell you that.
It has to have one for the amount of power that it has for takeoff and all.
Stability purposes. Yep. Elevators seem pretty standard. What are these right here you're talking about?
These are called static wicks to dissipate any static that builds up on the airplane.
Yeah, prevent explosions from happening when you don't want them to. Yeah, I mean, it's a thick fuselage.
It is.
I mean, I'm surprised when you told me that it got up to 410 knots. That's pretty incredible. And then the fold-up wings.
Well, it's standard for back then for carrier use to minimize the size of the aircraft so they could fit more on the carrier.
Yeah, Navy planes had those. Were they automatic? Did they have to crank? Were they hydraulic? Or?
This one is hydraulic. Some of the early ones were crank or manual, but most of them were hydraulic.
Yeah. Fuel tank?
Fuel tank, 150 gallons.
150? One on each side?
One on each side.
Now, kind of what you just got done describing was pretty much anything an aircraft could want to do an air-to-ground mission, this thing had it.
It was capable of any time the roles changed for the military, it could change right along with it, which was part of its longevity in the military.
Yeah. It's just an amazing plane.
The Skyraider's versatility and power was far beyond what could be expected from most other aircraft in service. As the war in Korea rages on, additional orders flow into the Douglas factory. The design team determines that these problems are partly the result of poor landing technique. In response, pilots are given additional practice. Also, the Skyraider is strengthened to withstand heavier impacts. While the Douglas team modifies the Skyraider, other planes serving in Korea are being phased out rapidly. The jets because of the rapid developments in technology, and the piston planes because they are simply too old. The Skyraider is also being scrutinized in order to develop specifications for a replacement aircraft. The conclusion is a tribute to the big Douglas aircraft. The Navy decides to buy 3 aircraft, splitting the roles performed by the Skyraider to a range of airframes. In 1949, the future of the ADs seems uncertain. No one could have predicted they'd endure long into the jet era, but orders continue. When production finally ceases on the 18th of February, 1957, 3,180 Skyraiders have been built. In September 1960, the first Skyraiders arrive in a new theater of conflict, in a new role, as fighters to join the Vietnamese Air Force. In May, 25 more aircraft arrive, where they become a major factor in the air war over Vietnam. United States involvement with the Vietnamese Air Force grows, not only in supplying aircraft, but helping in many ways to turn the Vietnamese into a combat-ready force. The challenge facing military planners is determining what type of aircraft will best answer the tactical requirements in counterinsurgency operations. The answer is an aircraft with the attributes of a Douglas Skyraider. U.S. involvement with the Vietnamese Air Force started in 1955, but it wasn't until the early 60s that the U.S. advisors are sent to Vietnam in noticeable numbers. American pilots supplement the locals. American administrators, ground crew, and trainers also multiply, and the flow of aircraft continues. When the Vietnamese pilots receive their first Skyraiders, they are disappointed. They were expecting jets. However, the Geneva Agreement outlaws the introduction of such advanced weapons into the conflict. The Vietnamese Air Force will not get its first jets, Northrop F-5s, until 1967. In the interim, they use a variety of aircraft in well-organized and effective operations against guerrilla forces. Spotters and attack aircraft work together closely to provide powerful and precise support to ground operations. Under the close and often hands-on guidance of the U.S. Air Force advisors, the Vietnamese Air Force develops tactical responses to guerrilla operations that are to remain models for much of the war. Smoke markers fired by Cessna bird dogs operating as forward air controllers indicate targets for the Skyraiders. In 1962, with a revision of Navy nomenclature, the name of the Skyraider changes again to the A-1. Skyraiders continue to arrive for service with the Vietnamese Air Force, and an A-1H is lost in combat on the last day of the war. The remnants of the Vietnamese Air Force flew their airworthy planes out to Thailand, and 11 of those planes were A-1s. But over the skies of Vietnam, Skyraiders perform an outstanding role in counterinsurgency, and another customer, the United States Air Force, was soon to be flying them alongside the Vietnamese. Once again, the Skyraider goes to war. During its service in Vietnam, the South Vietnamese nicknamed the A-1 the Crazy Water Buffalo. In 1964, after the incident in the Gulf of Tonkin, the United States formally commits its force to all-out war in Vietnam. With the U.S. entering the war comes a transformation of the conflict. Helicopters are the enduring image of Vietnam as gunships, as troop carriers, and as rescue for downed pilots.
Airborne. 101-.
Bravo 8-1, this is Clearwater. Roger. Your vision to Point Cairo, 28014. Over.
The helicopters provide a focus for forces on the ground and become a persisting symbol of the conflict. U.S. Air Force Skyraiders start Vietnam operations in May 1964, with Vietnamese observers in charge of activity. The twin-seat A-1Es they use are to be the first of many U.S. Air Force Skyraiders to serve in theater. By the time the E's begin to run out, they could be replaced with the still numerous single-seaters. The versatile aircraft is used to fly alongside Mach 2 jets. Skyraiders have exceptional attributes. The ground troops appreciate their heavy load of ordnance and the fact that they can loiter, waiting for work. Their pilots love the accuracy that can be achieved when flying something as stable, slow, and maneuverable as their A-1s. They are also grateful for the armed toughness of the planes, which can absorb tremendous battle damage. In their long career, the Skyraiders earned several nicknames. There is a drive to have them known as the Pulverizer, which never took. They are known after their call sign in Korea as ADs, Able Dogs. They also have other names. They are called SPADs, and in their rescue work, Sandy. Their activity in close air support is unmatched. They pound away with an accuracy impossible to achieve with supersonic aircraft. They can fly in virtually all weather. When the jets are grounded, the Skyraiders are out there working. Admittedly, they offer a pretty good target. Someone trying to hit a Mach 2 jet with a rifle welcomes the sight of a SPAD to shoot at, but the SPAD soaked up damage and kept on going, at least to the extent of getting home, even if they wouldn't fly again. The U.S. Air Force loses 153 Skyraiders in combat in Vietnam between 1962 and 1973. A further 41 are listed as operational losses. Considering the job they perform, this is a testament to the aircraft. 146 of the U.S. Air Force losses are caused by ground fire. Only 3 are lost to surface-to-air missiles, 2 to MiGs, and 2 in attacks on airfields. This reflects the way they are used in close support, wherever the troops happen to be that day, or as escorts for rescue helicopters, incredibly dangerous roles day after day. Whereas the overall U.S. average of losses due to ground fire is 57%, for the Skyraiders, the figure is 75%. The selection of propeller-driven aircraft for counterinsurgency reflects the advantage of this aircraft. They are less susceptible to being downed by small arms fire. They can loiter almost indefinitely and deliver their loads with pinpoint accuracy. The experience with the A-1s in Vietnam is so impressive that the Douglas Company is asked to provide an estimate to produce more of the planes 12 years after the Skyraider was out of production. The price per aircraft on a limited run to turn out new Skyraiders is considered too high, and the proposal is dropped. But the fact that this idea is contemplated is some measure of the status the aircraft has attained. It is unusual for a plane to go back into production, especially when the technology is considered obsolete. A-1s are coming directly out of combat into retirement, and there is still a strong demand for the plane. The twin-seat A-1E models that the Air Force first took out of Navy mothballs simply wore out. There comes a time in the life of an aircraft when the next rebuild cannot be justified, and the E models reach that point. The U.S. Air Force continues to use Skyraiders, replacing the aging E's with single-seat H models. The last E model flies its final mission on the 10th of April, 1967, and is hoisted aboard a ship for its journey back to the USA. It was a moment that held quite a bit of history. Next, the Skyraider literally becomes a lifesaver. March 10, 1966. A-1E pilot Major Bernard Fisher rescues a fellow pilot shot down over South Vietnam in the midst of enemy troops. Fisher is the first living Air Force pilot awarded the Medal of Honor. His Skyraider is now preserved at the Air Force Museum in Ohio. The Skyraider's nickname, SPAD, refers to a World War I biplane. It was a name jet pilots gave for the lumbering old war horses. However, the SPADs in Vietnam changed the jet pilot's scorn into grudging respect. The SPADs find their finest hour in a new role as a rescue helicopter escort. Because of the plane's unique design, it could carry a large amount of fuel and loiter in the air for long periods of time.
Now, how about fuel capacity for this plane? You talked about being able to stay at the slower airspeeds for long times on station to support the ground war. What did it have as far as a maximum fuel capacity, internal, external?
This airplane could stay up for over 10 hours.
10 hours.
It has about a 380-gallon fuel tank behind the pilot down in the fuselage, and it carried external fuel, another 300 gallons externally.
380 gallons behind the pilot.
Yep.
It's a good place for it.
Yeah.
Was it? No. How about the design of the tank? Was it a metal tank, aluminum tank?
It's a rubber bladder.
A rubber bladder
rubber
fuel
bladder.
tank.
Yep.
Interesting.
The large fuel tank makes the Skyraiders an important part of the rescue parties. Their ability to fly slow means they could protect the helicopters on their vital mission of rescuing downed pilots. The rescue parties involve a variety of aircraft: control aircraft, spotters, the rescue choppers, and the pugnacious A-1s as escorts. The control aircraft patrols at altitude, listening for the radio beacon of a downed pilot. After establishing the pilot's whereabouts, a rescue team is directed to the area. Strike aircraft will also cover the operation, especially when the rescue is conducted deep inside North Vietnam. The work of these crews in the helicopters and the other aircraft requires great courage. Despite the danger, the units press each mission as hard as possible, and in the course of the war are credited with an amazing 3,833 rescues.
Rooster Lead, this is Crown 1. We've verified your identity. Sandy's are en route. We'll arrive in your area in 8 minutes. Jolly Green's in 19 minutes. We have called MIG-Cap for you. It should be in your area by now.
Roger, I have tally-ho the MIG-Cap. Thank you.
Stay in orbit over Red Rooster 2 until Sandy's arrived.
Roger, Crown.
Roger, Crown. This is Sandy 1. Go ahead.
Red Rooster Lead is still orbiting over down pilot at coordinates 1020 north, 10550 east. He has reported enemy automatic weapon fire 1 mile north of down pilot. There may be a lot more around the pilot himself. Sandy 1, this is Crown. I am designating you on-scene commander. Take over.
Roger, Crown. I've got it.
Skyraiders fill the role of escort well. They have the endurance to stay aloft for hours. They can hover along with the slow helicopters. At the location of a rescue, they bring their firepower into play to suppress the hostile activity in the area, allowing the Jolly Greens to go about their business with little interference. For these missions, the Skyraiders are fully loaded with ordnance and ammunition. Because of the vulnerability of the helicopters to ground fire, it is essential that enemy activity is suppressed before the choppers present themselves as stationary targets, hovering above the downed crew. As a result, the A-1s engage in what is referred to as trolling for fire. This consists of flying low and deliberately drawing fire from enemy guns near the scene. When these guns are located and silenced, the air is safer for helicopters. It did, however, make the Skyraider a dangerous place to be. The rescue team's motto is that others may live. To that end, they were prepared to risk their lives. The parajumpers, or PJs, are the men who go down the wire to the pilot and are trained scuba divers in case the rescue takes place over water. The PJs are qualified parachutists and experts with small arms and in hand-to-hand combat. They are also fully trained in first aid. With the rest of the crew, they face the danger of flying low and slow in their chopper to the rescue site, often under intense fire. Then, they left even the aircraft's limited safety to become dangling targets, that others may live. The replacement for the SPAD in this role is another Navy plane, the Corsair II, or the Vought A-7. Although it's a jet, the Corsair is chosen for its SPAD-like qualities. It's subsonic, rugged, carries a huge load, is very accurate, and can loiter for long periods of time. The Navy splits the Skyraider's role among 3 other airframes. The Grumman tracker takes over anti-submarine missions. The Douglas Skywarrior carries out long-range bombing, including nuclear bombing. And the Douglas Skyhawk, the A-4, does everything else. But no one tells the Skyraiders. They are still there in 1964 when the carriers find themselves in Vietnam. Still a standard medium attack plane. Certainly the other types are present as well. But mingling with the screaming jets of the Phantoms, Skyhawks, and Vigilantes is the throbbing piston engine roar of the Skyraiders. They are an important part of the striking power of the carriers in the early years of Navy involvement, and their slow and accurate attacks bring huge bomb loads to targets with deadly effect. In contrast to their jet-powered comrades, they are likely to be found on their way back to the ship, quietly looking for targets of opportunity. Their accuracy, sizable payloads, and long range makes them uniquely valuable. But all good things come to an end. If the production lines are not to be reopened for further construction, there are only the existing Skyraiders. They are getting old, not just because of their date of manufacture, but because they are being worked so hard. What happens to a plane in combat is extraordinary, and the Skyraiders are in the process of being replaced by a fourth aircraft, the Grumman A-6 Intruder. Although some are taken out of mothballs to be revitalized by the U.S. Air Force, the A-1s are being phased out of service, and this time, it's for real. On Sunday, the 20th of February, 1968, a young pilot lands his Skyraider on the USS Coral Sea after completing a combat mission over Vietnam. He is 23 years old, and the Skyraider has been in service for 23 years. He had just completed the last combat mission of the U.S. Navy Skyraiders. That was it. The old plane has finished its Navy service. No amount of polishing can extend their lifespan. They could have still been loaded up with weapons and sent on more missions, but it's time to call it a day.
After a long career, the Skyraider finally earns an overdue retirement. For the men who flew them, the Spads were difficult to give up. This was by no means a reflection on their new aircraft. But for anyone who flew the able dogs, there was simply no replacement for the seat-of-your-pants flying, the ponderous but dynamic control, the stability, and the accuracy and power of the Skyraiders.